Hello, this is Mike at Gamefromscratch, and welcome to another episode of Bad GameDev, No Cookie. This one is looking at game dev mistakes and how we can avoid them in the future. And this one particularly isn't looking at a specific game, it's looking at a genre of games. And this is something that has been happening for years, and it annoys me to no end. Today's example, I'm using Real Racing 3 for iOS and Android devices. It's a free-to-play racing game, but this could have just as easily applied to Gran Turismo or Forza or most other games. Although the reality is I found those a lot harder to capture, and the only racing game I have on the PC that ironically doesn't apply to, and I'm terrible at. And on the topic of terrible, I'm controlling this over AirPlay, and there's about a half a second of lag, which makes our racing game virtually impossible to control. So I don't normally drive this horribly, but it still illustrates my point. Now here I am just starting off, and you'll see in a second I am in 22nd place. And they all do this. Every racing game does this. I have I have to make up 21 spots in 2 laps. Okay, I don't know if you are a fan of racing games at all in the slightest, or sorry, racing in general. If you've ever watched a Formula 1 race, the number of times a car has passed 22 cars is 0. It never happens. It doesn't happen. Even in NASCAR, there isn't that much passing. IndyCar, I've seen a few times where the person in last place actually came back to win. But they didn't do it in 2 laps. They did it in 120 or 150 or so on. So right off the hop, they've taken these games and normally they've created a fairly good simulation. And what they forced you to do, more or less, is ignore driving lines. Because if you actually race proper racing, where if you draft the car in front of you, play conservative, go into the corners properly, etc., you're going to lose. Because you're racing the strategy that you would have over a full-length race. Now, don't get me wrong. I understand why they do this. First off, if they made it a full-length thing, like if it was a 2 or 3 hour race, they could do this accurately. But who wants to race for 2 hours, 3 hours plus? That's like the most hardcore sim people out there. So I understand why they've compressed this. The problem is, by putting you at the pack, at the very, very back of the pack, they're pretty much forcing you into a situation of bumper cars. And the way that you kind of get around this is by making your car faster than its equivalents. And that's kind of how these games work. You lose, you upgrade your car to a point where it's strong enough, and then you start winning. And the minute you get in front, because you've got a more powerful car than everyone else, you win constantly, and there's no longer fun because you are the fastest car. So what they've done is they've taken an entire genre, taken away all of the skill and all the aspects of actually driving it, and thrown it all out the window for this stupid, here, go ahead and lap 22 cars in 2 laps stuff. Now, I'm not saying that there's a very easy solution to this. Like I said, you can't run a full race because that would just be mind-numbingly boring. I know Gran Turismo actually did that sort of on some of the earlier stuff, where some of these races would take you hours to run, and it sucked. I quit playing at that point, to be honest. And most of these racing games, actually, if I play on a console, you'll find as you're playing them, as the skill level goes up, the lap times get longer and longer and longer. And some of them you're looking at, 45 minutes for a race, and I just don't have that most of the time. So I understand how they have to compress time, but this always starting you at the back, but giving you a more powerful car thing is terrible. And I'm using Real Racing today to bring up a more insidious side of it. Is Real Racing really ramps up your competition, so you have to upgrade your car. So it's all about how strong your car is, and has jack to do with how good you are. And that is just even more annoying when you start looking at the free-to-play model. So it makes this more insidious. However, if you want to actually solve this problem, well, you can't solve it. The reality is you're trying to compress a multi-hour race into a few minutes and make it fun. I would suggest, number one way of doing it is just doing it the way that the racing world does it. Have a time trial, have a timed lap, and then based on how well you did versus the computer, you become, that determines your starting place on the grid. You get the pole position, you get et cetera, et cetera. And earlier racing games used to do this. I don't know why they got away from this. And I think part of it is lazy game balance. I think they've gotten used to this. Here, start at the pack and have fun running your way through. And that's another aspect of this that's kind of missed out. Passing cars is fun. Racing around on the lap by yourself, not so fun. So I get why they also want to keep you together. Now, another option they could do is do it to skill. So basically, do your starting grid based off of the difficulty level of the user. So if I have my game set at easy mode, I start in position, say there were 20 cars, I start in between 1 and 5. If I have average, I start at a random number between 5 and 15. And if I have difficulty setting, I start at 16 to 20. So actually incorporate the starting grid into your difficulty curve. Then it makes sense. People can tune it and you don't run into this stupid bumper car stuff. And then have it so that you can actually do a timed lap or a test lap to actually determine your pole positioning. Then the sim people actually have a purist thing there, whereas the people that don't want to have a lap before they start the race, you use this 3-way setting, determine their lap position. All I know is any solution has to be better than what they go with now, because what you're doing is you're adding a system on top of your game that is completely taking away all of the sim aspects of your game. And I just can't fathom why the entire industry continues to do this. So if someone out there is creating a racing game and you're listening to this, please make the starting grid flexible, either based off difficulty or based off qualifying, and your game will instantly get 10 times better. And then we can actually race with proper lines, and we can, we can draft properly and not play bumper cars for the first lap, and you will have a better game. So that was that. This is something that's bothered me probably for 10 years, so good to get that off my chest. Hope you enjoyed that. That was Bad GameDev, No Cookie, and today we were looking at racing games. And what you saw in front of you today was Real Racing 3. See you later. Bye.